Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Zone. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. The scream that woke me wasn't human. I sat up in my small ranger cabin, cold sweat running down my back, and found Ghost, my German shepherd, standing alert by my bed. His ears were perked forward, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Something was wrong, really wrong. That's when I heard it again, a howl that made my bones shake. It wasn't like anything I'd heard in my 15 years as a park ranger in Ozark National Forest. Not a wolf, not a coyote, not even a mountain lion. This was something else. Ghost pressed his warm body against my leg, and I ran my hand through his thick fur. He's been my only family since Sarah died 5 years ago, and the only one who understands what happened during that rescue mission last winter. The one that still gives me nightmares. The one that left me as the only survivor of my search and rescue team. "It's okay, boy," I whispered. But Ghost knew I was lying. Nothing had been okay in these woods for weeks now. My name is Michael Foster. I'm 43 years old, and a park ranger with a past I'd rather forget. But the past has a way of catching up to you, especially in places like this, where the pines grow so thick they block out the sun, and the fog hides secrets in its cold embrace. Part 1. The Warning Signs. It started with the cattle. Jim Parker, an old farmer whose land borders the National Forest, called me one morning in early October. His voice shook as he described what he'd found. 3 of his cows cut open with surgical precision. No blood, no tracks, no signs of struggle. "Mike," he said, "I've seen mountain lion kills and bear attacks. This ain't like that. Something ain't right." I drove out to his farm that morning, Ghost riding shotgun as always. The moment we stepped out of my Ranger truck, Ghost's behavior changed. He kept his tail low and his head down, sniffing the air with an intensity I'd never seen before. The dead cattle looked like they'd been dissected by a medical student. Clean cuts, organs removed with precision. But what really got to me were their eyes. They were wide open, frozen in a look of pure terror. That was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, things got stranger. Hunters started reporting weird sounds in the forest, howls that made their equipment malfunction and left them feeling dizzy and scared. 3 people went missing on the old logging roads. All we found were their backpacks, perfectly placed in the middle of the trail, like someone or something was leaving us a message. Ghost knew something was wrong before any of us. My usually calm shepherd started refusing to go into certain parts of the forest. He'd plant his feet and whine, something he hadn't done since his K9 training days. At night, he'd pace the cabin, staring out windows at things I couldn't see. Then came the tracks. I found the first set near one of our old fire towers. Footprints that looked almost human, but way too big. They started normal-sized, then got bigger and bigger, like whatever made them was growing as it walked. When I tried to make a plaster test, the prints vanished before my eyes, melting away like ice on a hot day. But the worst part? The howls at night. They started as normal wolf calls, but then they'd change, becoming something that made my head spin and my vision blur. Several times I woke up on the cabin floor, with Ghost licking my face, having lost hours of time with no memory of what happened. One night I found glowing marks on the trees near my cabin, weird symbols that seemed to pulse with a greenish light. When I touched one, images flooded my mind. Dark shapes moving through the trees, eyes glowing in the darkness, and a feeling of hunger so strong it made my knees buckle. That's when I knew we weren't dealing with normal predators. Something was hunting in my forest. Something smart, something organized, something that was watching us back. I called my old partner, Thomas Reed, for backup. He arrived the next day, taking one look at the symbols and the tracks before saying what I'd been afraid to admit. "Mike, we're going to need more help." But help wasn't coming. Because that night while we were patrolling the North Ridge, we heard a howl that changed everything. It wasn't just a sound, it was words, and they were calling my name. Ghost pressed against my leg, his fur standing on end as the forest around us went completely silent. In the distance, through the thick pines, I saw eyes glowing in the darkness. Not just one pair, 6 pairs, and they were moving towards us. That's when I remembered something my grandfather, a Cherokee elder, once told me. Not all monsters in these woods are legends, Michael. Some of them are waking up. He was right. They were awake now, and they were hungry. Thomas and I stood frozen as the eyes moved closer through the trees. Ghost stayed between me and those lights, his body tense but not afraid. That's when I noticed something odd. Each pair of eyes glowed a different color. Red, blue, green, yellow, purple, and the biggest pair, a burning white that seemed to look right through me. "Mike," Thomas whispered, "we need to move. Now." But I couldn't. Not because I was brave, but because something was holding me in place. It felt like someone had poured cement into my boots. A voice echoed in my head, but not through my ears. The one who smells of death. The one who lost his pack. My head started spinning with memories that weren't mine. I saw flashes of an underground lab, cages, pain, and rage. So much rage. Ghost's bark snapped me out of it, and suddenly I could move again. We ran. Not the smart kind of running where you pace yourself. The scared kind, where you don't care if branches hit your face or if you might trip. Ghost led the way somehow, knowing which path was safest. We made it to my truck, and I've never started an engine so fast in my life. As we drove away, Thomas kept looking out the back window. "They're not following," he said, surprised. "Why aren't they following?" "Because they don't need to," I answered, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. They wanted us to see them. They wanted me to see something. Back at my cabin, Thomas and I spread out our maps of the forest. "The tracks all lead to this area," I said, pointing to a section near the old mining district. "But that's not the weird part. Look at this." I pulled out my phone and showed him pictures of the glowing tree marks I'd found. "I know these symbols," Thomas said, looking pale. "They're from classified files, military files." That's when Thomas told me something he'd been keeping secret. 10 years ago, the military had a research facility hidden in the old mines. They said it was for testing new tracking dogs, but the project was suddenly shut down. All the files were marked Failed Evolution Initiative. "We need to check those mines," I said. Ghost's ears perked up at my words, and he walked to the door, ready to go. We waited until morning. The forest is dangerous at night on normal days. Only an idiot would go hunting monsters in the dark. As we hiked to the mines, Ghost suddenly stopped. His nose pointed to a small opening between some rocks that I'd never noticed before. The smell hit us first. If you've ever found a dead animal in the woods, multiply that by 100. Thomas threw up. I nearly did too. Ghost whined but stayed by my side as we turned on our flashlights and went inside. What we found wasn't a mine. It was a den. But not like any animal den I'd seen before. The walls were covered with more of those glowing symbols, and scattered around were things that shouldn't be there. Torn military uniforms, old research papers, and personal items from the missing hunters. "Mike," Thomas called out, his voice shaking. He was holding something that made my blood run cold. A collar. A military dog collar with a label that read, "Subject 23, Enhanced Canine Integration Project." Ghost growled. Not at us, but at something deeper in the cave. That's when we heard it. The sound of claws on stone. Not from one direction, but from all around us. We'd walked right into their home. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw them. Clearly for the first time. They were like wolves, but wrong. Too big, too human-like when they stood on their back legs. Their fur wasn't normal either. It seemed to shift colors in the light like oil on water. The one with white eyes stepped forward. It walked on 2 legs, its head nearly touching the cave ceiling. When it opened its mouth, I heard its voice. In my mind again. "You have questions, Michael Foster. We have answers. But first you must understand what they made us become." Ghost didn't bark or attack. He just stared at the creatures like he was talking to them too. And that's when I realized Ghost knew about them all along. He'd been trying to protect me, yes, but he'd also been trying to prepare me. The white-eyed creature reached out its massive hand. "Let me show you," it said in my mind. "Let me show you why we hunt." I should have run. Every human instinct told me to run. But Ghost didn't move, and I trusted him more than my fear. So I stayed, and that's when the creature touched my forehead. What I saw next changed everything I thought I knew about our world, about Ghost, and about what really happened. To my search and rescue team last winter, the memories hit me like a tidal wave. I saw scientists in white coats injecting something into wolf pups. I saw cages filled with creatures that grew too fast, their bones cracking as they changed. I felt their pain, their confusion, their anger. But most of all, I saw what they saw when they looked at Ghost. He wasn't just any dog. He was their brother. When the white-eyed creature, their leader, their alpha, pulled its hand away, I stumbled backward. Thomas caught me before I fell. Ghost was part of their program, I whispered. But he was different. He didn't change like the others. The alpha's voice filled my head again. He was the first success, the one who kept his mind. The others, we became something else, something hungry. That's when Thomas did something I'll never forget. He pulled out his phone and started recording. The creatures didn't like that, not one bit. Everything happened fast after that. The pack moved like shadows, too quick to see. One moment Thomas was beside me, the next he was gone. Just gone. His phone clattered to the ground, still recording. Ghost barked once, a sharp, commanding sound I'd never heard him make before. The pack stopped moving. In the beam of my fallen flashlight, I saw them all freeze like they had to listen to him. "Run!" Ghost's voice echoed in my head. Not the alpha's voice. Ghost's voice. My dog, my best friend, had been talking to me all along. I ran. This time it was Ghost pushing me from behind, making sure I got out. Behind us, I heard Thomas screaming, but the sound was cut off too quickly. The next few days were a blur. I reported Thomas missing, but when the police searched the cave, they found nothing. No symbols, no evidence, no Thomas. Just an empty hole in the ground. But things were only getting worse. Every night another ranger station would go dark. No radio contact, no survivors. Just those glowing marks on the trees and big footprints that changed size. I tried calling for help, but nobody believed me. Until Ghost led me to an old storage locker in the ranger station's basement. Inside we found files, real government files about something called Project Moonhunter. The photos made me sick. Scientists mixing wolf and human DNA, trying to create the perfect soldier. The dates on the files matched the time Ghost was a military K-9. But Ghost wasn't just leading me to files. He was leading me to their main den. Deep in the forest, past the areas where nothing grows, we found an old military bunker hidden under a fake rock face. The entrance was torn open from the inside, like something had clawed its way out. Inside, more horrors waited. Broken cages, big enough for bears. Surgery tables with strange machines. And on the walls, hundreds of photos of test subjects. Wolves that slowly turned into something else. Something that could stand like a man but hunt like a beast. That's when I heard Thomas's voice behind me. "I tried to tell them you'd figure it out," he said. But his voice was wrong. It echoed in my head the same way the alphas did. When I turned around, Thomas wasn't Thomas anymore. His eyes glowed blue and his smile showed too many teeth. "They didn't just take me, Mike," he said, his body starting to change as he spoke. "They showed me the truth. About the program, about Ghost. About what really happened to your rescue team last winter." Ghost growled, putting himself between me and Thomas. But Thomas just laughed, a sound that turned into a howl halfway through. "Ghost isn't protecting you from us," Thomas said, his face stretching into something terrible. "He's been preparing you for what you have to become." The worst part? Deep down, I knew he was telling the truth. because now I remembered what really happened. In that winter storm last year, it wasn't an avalanche that killed my team. It was a hunt. And now, hearing more howls coming from every direction, I realized something else. This hunt wasn't over. It was just beginning. I backed away from Thomas, or what used to be Thomas, my hand reaching for the gun on my belt. But Ghost did something unexpected. He sat down, calm as could be, and looked at me like he was saying, "It's time you knew everything." The memories came back clearer now. That winter rescue mission, the storm. My team of 5 searching for lost hikers. But we weren't the only ones searching that night. "You remember now, don't you?" Thomas asked, his voice rough and animal-like. "Your team found something they weren't supposed to find." I did remember. We'd found a cave just like this bunker. Inside were cages broken open, warning signs about Project Moonhunter everywhere. And blood. So much blood. Ghost knew what we'd found, I said slowly, the truth hitting me like a punch. To the gut. "He tried to warn us, but we didn't understand." Thomas nodded, his face now more wolf than human. The pack was there, newly escaped, hungry, confused. They didn't want to hurt anyone, but my team pulled their guns. I finished. "We shot first." That's when Ghost finally spoke in my mind, his voice gentle but sad. "I couldn't save them all. I could only save you." The cave walls started to glow with those strange symbols, and more of the pack emerged from the shadows. 6 pairs of glowing eyes, red, blue, green, yellow, purple, and white. But now I understood what the colors meant. They weren't just ranks. They were the colors my team members had been wearing that night. The Alpha, the one with white eyes, had been wearing a white winter coat, just like Sarah, my wife. My Sarah, who I thought had died in that storm. "Sarah," I whispered. The Alpha stepped forward, and for a moment I saw her face in those white eyes. "I tried to stop them," her voice echoed in my head. "I tried to keep them from hurting you, but the change was too strong. The hunger was too much." "That's why Ghost stayed with you," Thomas said. "To protect you, to watch you, to wait until you were ready to understand." "Ready for what?" I asked, but I think I already knew. That's when I heard helicopters overhead. Through the bunker's broken windows, spotlights swept the forest. Men in black military gear were rappelling down ropes. "They've been watching," Thomas snarled. "Waiting to see if the experiment was successful. Waiting to catch us all." Sarah, the Alpha, reached out her massive clawed hand. "We have to go. Now. But you have a choice to make, Michael." Ghost stood up and walked to my side, pressing against my leg like he'd done 1,000 times before. But this time, I felt something else. A small bite on my ankle, quick and sharp. "I'm sorry," Ghost's voice whispered in my mind. "But sometimes to save someone, you have to change them." The room started to spin. My skin felt hot, then cold. Outside, I heard shouting, guns being loaded. The military team was getting closer. "Choose. Quickly," Thomas said. "Become one of us and live, or stay human and watch them destroy everything you love." Again, Sarah reached for me one more time. "Remember what you promised me, Michael, the day we got married, that you'd love me no matter what I became." The soldiers were at the door now, trying to break it down. My body felt strange, like my bones were trying to move in new ways. Ghost stood between me and the door, ready to protect me one last time. I had seconds to decide, stay human and lose everything again, or become something else, something both beautiful and terrible. That's when the decor burst open and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, everything was different. Colors were sharper, smells were stronger, and I could hear everything. The soldiers' heartbeats, their whispered commands, the helicopters miles away. I was changing, but I wasn't scared anymore. The soldiers had Ghost cornered. Their guns were loaded with silver bullets. They knew what they were hunting. But they didn't know what Ghost really was, what I was becoming. "Take the dog down first," one soldier said. Then the others. That's when Sarah, my Alpha, let out a howl that shook the whole bunker. The Sound hit the soldiers like a physical wave, making them stumble. In their confusion, Ghost moved. He was beautiful to watch. Every military command I'd ever taught him, every protection technique, but now with something more, something supernatural. He moved like smoke between the soldiers, not attacking but herding them, pushing them back toward the door. My body burned as the change took over. Bones stretched, muscles grew. But the strange thing was, I kept my mind, just like Ghost had, just like Sarah had, at least partly. "The experiment worked," said a new voice. A man in a white coat stepped through the door, holding some kind of control tablet. Multiple successful transformations, multiple retained consciousnesses. He smiled, but not in a nice way. "Thank you all for your participation." Thomas lunged at him, but the man pressed something on his tablet. All the creatures, including Thomas, dropped to their knees in pain, all except Ghost and me. "Ghost was the first success," the man said. "Immune to our controls. And now you, Mr. Foster. Both of you perfect specimens. Think of the armies we could create." I looked at Ghost, at Sarah, at Thomas, all of them suffering, and I understood something. Ghost hadn't just been protecting me all these years. He'd been teaching me about loyalty, about pack, about what it really means to be human. The change took me completely then. But instead of fighting it, I let it come. My body grew, muscles rippled, fur sprouted. But my mind stayed clear. The scientist raised his tablet again, but I was faster now. One swipe of my new claws and his precious control device shattered. The other creatures rose, free from the pain. The soldiers started shooting, but we moved like shadows between the bullets. Not attacking, we weren't monsters, not really. Just pushing them back out of our forest. Sarah's voice filled my head. "The bunker, it all has to end." I understood. Ghost ran to the old control panel, the one thing he'd been trained to find all those years ago. One bite to the right wire, and the facility's self-destruct sequence started. We ran into the night as the explosions began. Behind us, the soldiers scrambled to their helicopters. The bunker collapsed, burying Project Moonhunter forever. In the forest, under the full moon, I looked at my new family. Sarah, her white eyes glowing with love I thought I'd lost. Thomas, finally at peace with what he'd become. The others, no longer controlled by pain and hunger. And Ghost, my loyal Ghost, looking up at me with proud eyes. "What now?" I asked in my new thought voice. Sarah stepped forward. "Now we protect the forest, like we were meant to do all along." Ghost barked happily, and I felt his joy in my mind. He had done his job. He had kept me safe until I could understand, until I could become what I was always meant to be. Epilogue. These days, hikers in the Ozark National Forest sometimes talk about seeing strange things in the shadows. Rangers who walk on two legs one moment and four the next. A pack of massive wolves that help lost children find their way home. A German shepherd that appears like a ghost when people are in trouble, leading them to safety. The military never came back. The files about Project Moonhunter were destroyed. But if you're ever in these woods at night and you hear a howl that sounds almost human, don't be afraid. It's just me and my family, keeping our forest safe. And if you look carefully, you might see Ghost running beside us, his spirit still guarding the woods he loved so much. Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't monsters at all. Sometimes they're just protectors that the world wasn't ready to understand. And sometimes, to find out who you really are, you have to become something else entirely. The dead deer shouldn't have been standing up. That's what hit me first as I walked my morning patrol route through Yellowstone National Park. The animal was propped against a tree like some sick puppet, its glassy eyes staring right at me. But what really made my skin crawl was how clean it looked. No blood, no mess, just a neat hole where its heart should have been. My name's Thomas Hawkins, and after 20 years as a park ranger here, I thought I'd seen everything. Bears tearing through campsites, tourists getting too close to geysers. Even that time a moose wandered into the visitor center. But this was different. I should have called it in right away, but my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my radio. It had been 6 months since I'd had a drink, and right then, the flask I used to keep in my desk drawer was screaming my name. But I couldn't go back to that, not after what it cost me. Instead, I did what I'd learned from my years. Working with the local tribes as their liaison officer, I studied the scene. The ground around the deer was different, darker somehow, like someone had poured water all around it. But we hadn't had rain in weeks. The grass seemed taller too, greener than it should be this late in the season. And there was this smell, sweet, like rotting fruit, but not quite natural. That's when I noticed the pattern in the clearing behind the deer. At first I thought it was just flattened grass, maybe from animals bedding down. But as I got closer, I saw how the lines curved and swirled, making shapes that reminded me of the stories the tribal elders used to tell. Stories about the spirits that lived in the earth, from times long before this was a national park. I'd seen crop circles in photos before, pranks made by people looking for attention. But this was different. The grass wasn't just flattened, it was woven together, like a basket made by giant hands. And in the center there was something that made my throat go dry. A perfect spiral of mushrooms, each one pulsing with a faint amber glow. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Ranger Hawkins, come in." It was Linda from dispatch. "We've got another missing hiker report, third one this month." I keyed the radio, my eyes still fixed on that glowing spiral. "Copy that. Where was the last sighting?" "Near Old Faithful." But get this. They were seen headed toward the backcountry, following what they said looked like fireflies. In broad daylight. My stomach turned. The harvest moon was coming in just a few days, and these strange happenings were piling up too fast to be coincidence. The natives had warnings about times like these, about what happens when the earth gets angry. I'd always nodded politely at those stories, filed them away with all the other legends and myths. Now, staring at that deer with its missing heart and those glowing mushrooms, I wasn't so sure anymore. Something was wrong in my park, something that went deeper than missing hikers or dead animals. And as the morning sun rose higher, casting strange shadows through the trees, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The worst part? Deep down in my gut, where the old cop instinct still lived, I knew this was all connected. The missing hikers, the dead animals, these strange patterns. They were all pieces of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. But as the only ranger, with both tracking experience and knowledge of the old stories, I didn't have much choice. I took one last look at the deer, snapped some photos with my phone, and radioed in my location. Whatever was happening here, I had a feeling I was going to need all the help and all the old wisdom I could get. I spent the next few days checking every trail and back road I could find. Something inside me said I needed to hurry. The harvest moon was coming in just 4 days, and my gut told me that mattered. The mornings were getting weird. Each day I'd find more animals laid out in perfect circles, like someone had arranged them while playing a sick game. 5 rabbits, pointing to the center like clock hands. 3 foxes curved into a spiral, always with those same clean holes where their organs should be. But it was the trees that really got to me. I first noticed it on the maple near Thompson Creek. A thick, golden liquid was oozing out of its trunk, like syrup, but wrong. When I touched it with a stick, the wood started smoking. The liquid felt alive somehow, and the longer I watched, the more trees started doing the same thing. "You seeing this stuff too?" My partner Mike asked me over lunch at the ranger station. He hadn't touched his sandwich, just kept staring out the window. "The plants in my garden, they grew 3 feet overnight. 3 feet, Tom. And they don't look right, all twisted and dark." I nodded, picking at my own food. Getting calls. From hikers, too. They say they lose track of time on the trails. Go out for an hour walk, come back thinking it's been just a few minutes, but their watches show they've been gone half a day. Mike leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think it has something to do with those tremors we've been getting? The geology team says they make no sense. They're moving in patterns like something's swimming under the ground." Just then, the radio squawked. "Rangers, We've got another missing person report. Teen girl, last seen near Dragon's Mouth, Spring. Parents say she was filming something on her phone about the grass moving by itself. I grabbed my gear, but before I headed out, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the reservation just outside the park and asked to speak with Elder Joseph. If anyone knew what was happening, it would be him. I found him sitting on his porch, carving a piece of wood. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "The earth is hungry, Thomas," he said before I could even ask anything. "When people forget to respect the land, it finds ways to remind them." "What do you mean, hungry?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but those animals with their missing organs kept flashing through my mind. Elder Joseph set down his carving. "Our stories tell of a spirit, a walker between worlds. It sleeps in the deep places, waiting. But when the ground gets sick from what people put in it, the spirit wakes up angry. And now," he pointed to the sky, "the harvest moon comes. It's time to feed." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "How do we stop it?" He gave me a sad smile. "First you have to find what woke it. The poison in the earth that made it hungry. But be careful, Thomas, it knows you're looking." On my way back to Dragon's Mouth Spring, I saw something that made me slam on my brakes. A whole field of grass was rippling like water, but there wasn't any wind. As I watched, frozen in my seat, the ground started to bubble up in places like something was pushing from underneath. I grabbed my phone to record it, but the screen went black. When I looked up again, the field was completely normal. But there was something new. A perfect circle of mushrooms, each one glowing with that same amber light I'd seen before. And in the middle of the circle was a backpack, the same kind the missing teen had been carrying. The radio crackled. Mike's voice came through, shaky and unclear. "Tom, you need to see this. By the old geyser basin, there's something growing out of the ground. Something big, and I swear it's moving." I started the truck, trying to ignore how the ground seemed to shift under my tires. The harvest moon was rising in 3 days, and I had a horrible feeling we were running out of time. Looking in my rearview mirror, I could have sworn I saw the grass in that field standing up and waving goodbye. I found Mike standing at the edge of the old geyser basin, his face as white as a sheet. Now I know why. Rising from the ground was something that looked like a tree, but trees don't grow this fast. And trees definitely don't pulse with a sickly, green light. As we watched, it grew another foot, its branches twisting like fingers reaching for the sky. The worst part was the sound, a wet, cracking noise like breaking bones. "We need to get back," I said, grabbing Mike's arm, but he wouldn't move. "Tom, look at the base." I wished I hadn't. Mixed in with the roots were things that shouldn't be there. Bits of fabric, a hiking boot, and something that looked horribly like human hair. That's when the smell hit us, sweet and rotting just like before, but stronger. The air filled with tiny spores that glowed like fireflies. Mike started coughing. "Don't breathe it in." I pulled my shirt over my nose, but Mike had already inhaled too much. His eyes went glassy. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "Can't you hear it singing?" Before I could stop him, Mike walked toward the tree thing. The ground beneath his feet turned dark and soft like wet coffee grounds. I ran after him, but stopped when I saw what was happening to the plants around him. They were growing, wrapping around his legs like hungry snakes. "Mike, get out of there!" He turned to me, smiling like he was in a dream. "The earth just wants to hug us, Tom. It's lonely." The ground under him suddenly sank like a trapdoor opening. I lunged forward and grabbed his hand, but something was pulling him down. Not just the earth, but roots and vines that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Help me." Mike's voice changed, finally showing fear. "Tom, please." I pulled harder, but the plants were stronger. They wrapped around Mike's chest, his neck. The last thing I saw was his face disappearing into the dirt still, wearing that terrible smile. The ground sealed up like nothing had happened. Just smooth earth where my partner had been standing seconds ago. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. Back to my truck, hands shaking so bad I could barely get the key in. As I drove, I called dispatch, trying to keep my voice steady. "Linda, mark Mike as as missing. And get me everything you can find about chemical dumping in the park. Old records, reports, anything. Chemical dumping? Tom, what's going on out there? I had to swallow hard. I think someone poisoned the earth and now it's poisoning us back. Back at the ranger station, I spread out all the old maps I could find. Linda brought in boxes of records from the archive. Together, we started seeing a pattern. 20 years ago, a company had been caught dumping toxic waste in remote parts of the park. They claimed they cleaned it all up, but the map showed something different. All the strange events, the missing people, the dead animals, the weird growth. They made a pattern too. A spiral, centered on one spot. An old waste dump site that was never properly cleaned. My phone buzzed, a text from Elder Joseph. It's not just awake now, it's hungry. The harvest moon comes tomorrow night. I looked at the photos on my wall. 8 missing people in the last month, including Mike, all taken by something that could control plants, move through earth, and turn solid ground into quicksand. Something that was getting stronger as the harvest moon got closer. The radio crackled. A new voice, scratchy and panicked. This is park maintenance. Something's happening at the visitor center. The plants, they're growing through the walls. And there's this thing coming up through the floor. I grabbed my gear and headed for the door. The sun was setting, and in the growing darkness I could see weird lights moving in the trees. Like those spores Mike had breathed in, but more of them. A lot more. Linda caught my arm. Tom, what are you going to do? I checked my flashlight, my radio, and the old medicine pouch Elder Joseph had given me years ago. First, I'm going to save those people at the visitor center. Then, I looked at the brightening moon in the sky. Then I'm going to find out what this thing really wants. As I stepped outside, I heard a deep rumble under my feet, like something big was moving down there, hunting, and I had a horrible feeling I knew what it was hunting for. The visitor center was worse than I imagined. Vines thick as fire hoses had burst through the floor tiles, wrapping around everything. The air was thick with those glowing spores, making it look like Christmas lights in fog. I pulled my bandana over my face, remembering what happened to Mike. Anyone here? I called out, shining my flashlight through the mess. The beam caught something moving. People huddled behind the information desk. 3 maintenance workers and a family of tourists. Don't breathe the spores, I warned them. Cover your faces and stay low. But as I got closer, I saw I was too late for one of the workers. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, petting a vine like it was a cat. His eyes had that same glassy look Mike's had. It's showing me things, he whispered. Underground. There's a whole world down there. They're all still alive, you know, being changed. A woman from the tourist family started crying. What's he talking about? Who's still alive? I knew. The missing hikers, Mike, all of them, somewhere below. Us being turned into, what, plant food or something worse? The floor trembled. A new vine, bigger than the others, punched through the center of the room. But this one was different. It had what looked like pods growing on it, each one about the size of a person. And inside one of them, pressed against the semi-clear surface, was a face. Mike's face. His eyes were open, but they weren't human anymore. They were green, glowing like the spores. The pod was filled with that same amber fluid I'd seen bleeding from the trees. Tubes that looked like plant roots were connected to his body. And as I watched, horrified, his skin started to look more and more like bark. We need to get out. Now. I started guiding people toward the emergency exit. But the glassy-eyed maintenance worker wouldn't move. You don't understand, he said, standing up. This is evolution. The earth is changing us, making us better. His skin had started to take on a greenish tint. The floor cracked again. More pods burst up, forming a circle. Around us. In each one, a face. The missing hikers, the teenage girl. All of them slowly turning into something else. Their mouths moved together, speaking in a voice that sounded like rustling leaves. The harvest moon rises tonight. The great changing begins. Join us, Thomas Hawkins. I grabbed the tourist family and the two remaining maintenance workers, pushing them toward the exit. Behind us, the first worker walked into the embrace of a vine, letting it wrap around him, like a cocoon. We made it outside just as the visitor center's roof split open, a massive tangle of vines and pods reaching toward the sky. The moon was almost full, casting everything in a sickly light. My radio crackled. Different voices, all talking at once. The ground is moving near Old Faithful. Plants growing out of control at the campgrounds. Something's coming up through the parking lot. I got everyone into my truck and drove them to the park entrance. The roads were chaos, trees bursting through the pavement, cars abandoned. As vines reached for them, the whole park was coming alive, and not in a good way. After getting the survivors to safety, I made one last call to Elder Joseph. "The waste dump site," he said before I could speak. "That's where it started, that's where it has to end. But Thomas, the Earthwalker isn't just taking people anymore. It's building something, an army. How do I stop it? Fire and water, blessed by the old ways. The geysers, Thomas, they're the park's natural cleansing system. But you'll have to get close, too close." I looked at my watch. 2 hours until the harvest moon reached its peak. In the distance, I could see more pods, rising from the ground, more people being changed. The park I'd protected for 20 years was turning into a nightmare garden. And somewhere in the middle of it all was my partner, my friend, becoming part of something horrible. That's when I remembered something Mike had said about the tremors. They moved in patterns like something swimming underground, and I knew where it was swimming to. The same place Elder Joseph was sending me, the old waste dump site, where the Earthwalker first woke up. I checked my gear one last time. Flashlight, radio, Elder Joseph's medicine pouch, and a map of the geyser system I'd grabbed from the ranger station. The moon was rising higher, and with it, the sound of cracking earth and growing things got louder. Time to end this, even if it meant going underground into the Earthwalker's lair, into a place where the ground itself was hungry, and everything that grew wanted to change you into something else. Started walking. Behind me, pods full of former humans reached for the harvest moon, their glowing eyes watching me go. Ahead, the ground bubbled and shifted, like something massive was waiting just below the surface, something that had been poisoned by humans, and now wanted to return the favor. The old waste dump site looked like something from a fever dream. Hundreds of pods had burst from the ground, glowing under the harvest moon. The air was thick with spores, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Kept my bandana tight over my face, following the map to where the underground geyser lines ran. That's when I heard Mike's voice behind me. "Tom, why are you fighting this?" I turned. Mike stood there, but he wasn't Mike anymore. His skin had turned to rough bark. His hair was like moss, and his eyes glowed that awful green. Roots grew from his feet right into the ground. "This isn't you, Mike," I said, backing away. "This thing, it's changed you. It made me better." Mike's voice sounded like leaves rustling. "We were wrong, Tom. Humans hurt the earth. Now the earth is taking it back. Join us. It doesn't even hurt." The ground started moving under my feet. Roots shot up, trying to grab my legs. I jumped back, nearly falling into one of the pods. Inside, the teenage girl who'd gone missing was almost fully transformed, her skin now like tree bark. That's when I felt it. Something massive moving deep underground. The Earthwalker was coming. The ground split open like a giant mouth, and it rose up. It looked like a tree and a person mixed together, tall as a building. Its body was made of twisted roots and branches, glowing with that sickly green light. Where its face should have been, there was a swirling mass of spores, and in the center, 2 eyes that burned like toxic waste. Thomas Hawkins, its voice, shook the ground. "You have seen what I offer, a new world, a better world." "You're not making anything better," I said, backing toward where I knew the geyser line was. "You're just turning people into fertilizer. They become part of the earth they poisoned." The creature's roots spread out, making the ground ripple. "As you will, too." Mike and the other transformed people moved closer, making a circle around me. Their green eyes glowed brighter as the harvest moon reached its peak. That's when I felt heat under my feet. The geyser line was right below me. Elder Joseph had said fire and water blessed by the old ways could cleanse this thing. I pulled out his medicine pouch, my hands shaking as I opened it. Inside was something that looked like salt mixed with herbs, and a piece of paper with words written in his language. I'd learned enough from my time with the tribe to sound them. "Out now!" the Earthwalker roared. All the transformed people reached for me at once. I threw the mixture from the pouch down at my feet and started reading the words. They were a blessing, a prayer to cleanse the earth of unnatural things. As I spoke, the ground started to rumble, but different from before. This was deeper, hotter. "Stop him!" the Earthwalker screamed, but it was too late. The geyser exploded. Boiling water, blessed by the ancient words, shot up through the Earthwalker's roots. Steam filled the air, and the creature let out a scream that shook the trees. The transformed people fell to their knees as the roots connecting them to the Earthwalker began to boil. "Mike," I ran to my partner as he collapsed. His skin was starting to look human again as the blessed water dissolved the creature's hold on him. The Earthwalker thrashed, its body starting to dissolve in the hot spray. "This changes nothing. The earth remembers. The earth will rise again." One last explosion of steam, and the creature dissolved into nothing but normal roots and branches. The pods melted away, leaving the missing people lying on the ground, slowly turning back to normal. But the Earthwalker was right about one thing. This wasn't really the end. Over the next few weeks, as the rescued people recovered in the hospital, we found changes in the park. Plants grew faster than they should. Sometimes, late at night, mushrooms would glow with a faint amber light. And me. Ever since that night, I've felt connected to the land. I can feel things growing underground, sense when the earth is unhappy. Mike recovered, but he remembers everything. Sometimes I catch him staring at trees with a strange look in his eyes. We don't talk about it much, but we both know the truth. The Earthwalker showed us something real. The land remembers what people do to it. Every now and then I visit Elder Joseph. He says I've been marked by the experience, chosen to be a kind of guardian, a bridge between the human world and the natural one. The Earthwalker was wrong, he tells me, but its message wasn't. We have to do better, have to listen to the land. So that's what I do now. I watch over the park, feeling its moods through my new connection. And when I see people dumping trash or hurting the land, I stop them, not just because it's my job, but because I know what can happen when the earth decides it's had enough. Sometimes on full moon nights, I still see those glowing spores floating in the dark. And sometimes, I swear I hear a voice in the rustling. "Doves, the earth remembers, and you know what? Maybe that's not such a bad thing to keep in mind." The howl that woke me up that night wasn't like anything I'd ever heard before in my 15 years as a forest ranger. It wasn't a wolf. I knew that sound by heart. This was different. It started like a man's scream but twisted into something that made my skin crawl. I sat up in my cabin bed, my heart pounding, and touched the burn scars on my face out of habit. Something was wrong in my forest. My name is Robert Martinez, and I came to the Ozark National Forest to escape my past. Most people run away to the city after a divorce. I ran deeper into the wilderness. After fighting forest fires for 12 years and losing my marriage in the process, I figured the most isolated ranger station in Arkansas would give me the peace I needed. I was wrong. It all started a week before the blood moon. You know, one of those rare times when the moon turns, red in the sky. I was doing my usual morning patrol when I got a call from Old Man Jenkins's farm. His voice was shaking. "Ranger Martinez, you better come see this. Never seen anything like it in my 50 years of farming." I drove my truck down the dusty road to his property, sipping my coffee and expecting to find maybe a couple of coyote kills. What I found made me drop my cup. 20 of his sheep lay dead in a perfect circle, not scattered like normal animal attacks. A perfect circle, like someone had used a compass to draw it. But that wasn't the strangest part. Each sheep looked like it had been cut open with surgical precision. No torn flesh, no messy feeding marks, just clean, straight cuts. What in God's name could do this? Jenkins whispered beside me, his weathered, face pale. I knelt down to examine the closest sheep, my fingers hovering over the strange cuts. In all my years of tracking predators, I'd never seen anything like this. The wounds were cold, but there was no rigor mortis. It was like they'd been frozen and thawed. That same day, 3 more farmers reported similar scenes. Perfect circles of dead animals, strange howls in the night. But it was what the Miller kids said that really got to me. 8-year-old Tommy and his 6-year-old sister Sarah both woke up screaming from the same nightmare. They saw men with wolf heads standing in their backyard, staring at their window. I told myself they were just scared kids sharing stories. But that night, as I sat in my cabin looking through the reports, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the tree line. The shadows seemed deeper than usual, and the forest, my forest that I knew like the back of my hand, felt different. Wrong. I walked to my window and stared out into the darkness. The moon was almost full, just days away from turning blood red. A twig snapped in the distance, and I squinted, trying to see through the trees. That's when I saw them. 2 gleaming eyes reflecting the moonlight, about 7 feet off the ground. Way too high for any normal wolf. Before I could grab my rifle, they were gone. But they left something behind. There, in the mud of my front yard, was a set of tracks I'll never forget. They started as wolf prints, huge ones, bigger than any I'd ever seen. But halfway across my yard, they changed. The last few prints were human footprints deep in the mud, as if whatever made them was incredibly heavy. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Everything I knew about wildlife, about tracking, about the natural order of things, none of it explained what I was seeing. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, I called Kevin Walsh, my partner from the next station over. If anyone would believe me, it would be him. But as I picked up the radio, another howl split the morning silence. This time it was closer, much closer, and this time I could have sworn it was calling my name. Kevin Walsh arrived at my cabin that afternoon. He's been my friend since ranger training, and I've never seen him scared. But when I showed him the tracks in my yard, his face went white. "I've been finding weird stuff in my area too, Rob," he said, running his hand through his graying hair. "Last week I found a circle of stones deep in the forest. Not camping stones. These were arranged like some kind of pattern, with animal bones placed between them. We decided to check it out." The drive was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. The forest felt different that day. Usually you'd hear birds singing, squirrels rushing through the trees. But everything was silent, like the woods were holding their breath. The stone circle was about 2 miles into the dense forest. As soon as I saw it, my stomach turned. The stones weren't just placed randomly. They formed a perfect star shape, with strange marks carved into each one. Between the stones, carefully arranged animal bones formed shapes I didn't understand. But worst of all was the ground. The grass around the circle was dead, turned black like it had been burned, but there were no burn marks. "Look at this," Kevin said, pointing to something near the edge of the circle. It was a paw print, but not like the ones at my cabin. This one was pressed so deep into the hard ground that whatever made it must have weighed hundreds of pounds. That night the dreams started. I was running through the forest, but not on 2 legs. I was on all 4s, moving faster than I ever could normally. The moon above was turning red, and I could smell everything. The moss on the trees, a rabbit hiding half a mile away, the sweat of a hiker on the main trail. I wasn't alone either. Dark shapes ran beside me, their breathing heavy and excited. We were hunting. I woke up covered in sweat, my heart racing. My legs were sore like I'd actually been running, and my sheets were covered in dirt. The clock read 3:33 a.m. The radio crackled. "Rob," it was Kevin's voice, shaking. "Are you awake?" "Yeah, what's wrong?" I had a dream. I was running with wolves, but they weren't normal wolves. They were something else," I finished his sentence. "I had the same dream." The next day, things got worse. Mrs. Thompson, who runs the local diner, called in a panic. Her 12-year-old son Danny hadn't come home from playing in the backyard. We organized a search party right away. We found Danny 2 hours later, hiding in an old storm drain. He was shaking but unhurt. "I saw them," he whispered when I helped him out. "They looked like wolves, but they could stand up like people. The big one, the one with silver fur, it talked to me." "What did it say, Danny?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. It said they're getting ready. The blood moon is coming, and they need more people for their pack. I shared a look with Kevin. Danny couldn't have known about our dreams, about the tracks, about any of it. But here he was, describing exactly what we'd been afraid to say out loud. That evening we heard reports of every dog in town barking at once. They were all facing the forest, howling and crying like they were terrified. Some broke their chains and ran away. Others just hid, shaking under their owners' beds. I sat in my cabin that night, checking and rechecking my rifle. The moon was getting fuller, more red each night. Kevin radioed every hour, just so we knew we weren't alone. We both knew something big was coming, but we had no idea how bad it would get. Just before midnight, I heard something scratching at my door. When I looked through the peephole, there was nothing there. But on my porch, scratched deep into the wooden boards, was a message. "Soon you'll run with us." The letters were carved by claws, each one 6 inches high. And they were still fresh, the wood splinters still falling as I stared at them. The call came at dawn. Jim Cooper, an experienced hunter who'd lived in these parts for 40 years, hadn't come back from his hunting trip. His wife was crying on the phone, saying he always came home before dark. I knew Jim. He was no amateur who'd get lost in the woods. Kevin met me at the trailhead where Jim's truck was parked. The morning was unusually cold, with a thick fog that made it hard to see more than 10 feet ahead. As we checked Jim's truck, I noticed something odd. His rifle was still inside, along with his backpack. Jim would never leave his gear behind, Kevin said, his breath making clouds in the cold air. Something's wrong. We followed Jim's tracks into the forest. They were clear at first, normal boot prints in the mud. But after about a mile, something changed. The tracks showed signs of running, like he was trying to get away from something. And there were other prints too. Those same massive wolf tracks we'd seen before, but more of them. At least 5 different sets. Then we heard it. A sound that made my blood freeze. "Help, please." It was Jim's voice, but it sounded wrong, like he was in terrible pain. We ran toward the sound, our flashlights cutting through the fog. What we found will haunt me forever. Jim was lying in a small clearing, but something was horribly wrong. He was split in half at the waist, but somehow, impossibly, he was still alive and conscious. There was no blood. The wound edges looked frozen, just like the sheep we'd found. They wanted me to see it happen, Jim whispered when we reached him. "The silver one." He spoke to me, said they needed to practice making us like them. Kevin threw up in the bushes. I keyed my radio with shaking hands, calling for emergency help, even though I knew in my heart it was too late. "Listen." Jim grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "They're not just killing, they're changing, learning how we're put together. The blood moon, they need it for something big." Those were his last words. After the medical team took Jim's body away, Kevin started acting strange. He kept rubbing his temples like he had a headache, and his eyes wouldn't focus properly. "Rob," he said, his voice shaky. "I can hear them, in my head. They're talking to each other, planning something." "What do you mean you can hear them?" "It's like whispers, but not in English. And I can see flashes of things. A cave. Bones. Ranged in patterns. They're calling it their feeding den." I didn't want to believe him, but after everything we'd seen, how could I not? We reported everything to our supervisor, but he just thought we were spooked by a regular animal attack. He didn't see what we saw. Didn't hear Jim's last words. That night, I stayed at Kevin's cabin. He was getting worse. One minute he'd be normal. The next he'd start speaking in a strange language I'd never heard before. His eyes would roll back, and he'd talk about running with the pack, about the taste of raw meat, about the joy of the hunt. I tried to radio for help, but all I got was static. Through the window, I could see the moon getting redder each hour. We were running out of time. Around midnight, Kevin suddenly sat up straight, his eyes wide with fear. "They're coming," he whispered. "They want me to show them where the other rangers are. They're going to hunt them all down, and Rob..." He grabbed my shoulder, his fingers digging in painfully. "They want you most of all. The silver one. He says you smell like fire. Says that makes you perfect for the change." Before I could respond, we heard howls from every direction. But these weren't like before. These howls had words in them. They were calling Kevin's name. And Kevin started to smile. I had to tie Kevin up. I hated doing it, but he wasn't himself anymore. He kept trying to run into the forest, calling out in that strange language. I used some rope from his emergency kit and secured him to a kitchen chair. But the whole time, he just kept smiling that weird smile. "They're going to show me everything, Rob," he said, his voice switching between normal and something deeper, rougher. "The cave. I can see it so clearly now. It's beautiful." "What cave, Kevin? Where is it?" His eyes focused for a moment, becoming clear and normal, the old Kevin I knew. "Blue Creek Canyon, near the old mining trail. Rob, you have to stop them. Before I tell them everything, please." I knew the place he was talking about. It was one of the most remote parts of the forest, full of old caves that we'd marked as dangerous on all the hiking maps. I grabbed my gear, made sure Kevin was secure, and radioed for backup. All I got was static, just like before. The drive to Blue Creek Canyon was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The moon hung low and red in the sky, making everything look like it was covered in blood. No animals in sight, not even insects making noise. Just dead silence and that red light. I found the cave entrance exactly where Kevin's directions led me. The smell hit me first, like a butcher shop left in the sun too long. There were scratches all around the entrance, some as high as my head, and bones scattered everywhere. I clicked on my flashlight and went in. The tunnel went down deep into the earth. The walls were covered in those same strange symbols we'd found in the forest, but here they were everywhere, carved into every surface. My light caught something shiny on the ground, a ranger's badge. It belonged to Mike Chen from the East Station. He'd gone missing 2 weeks ago. That's when I heard the singing. It wasn't like any music I'd ever heard before. It was deep, rumbling, sounds that made my teeth hurt, mixed with high-pitched howls that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I followed the noise, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The tunnel opened into a huge cave, and what I saw there made me forget how to breathe. Bones. Hundreds of bones arranged in giant circles on the floor, but they weren't just piled up. They were carefully placed to make pictures. From where I stood, I could see they formed the shape of a giant wolf's head, and in the middle of it all was a kind of altar made of stones, with something on top that glowed red in my flashlight beam. I moved closer, fighting every instinct that told me to run. On the altar was a piece of silver fur that seemed to pulse with its own light. Next to it were photos, driver's licenses and ID cards of missing people, and a map of the forest with red X's marked all over it. With horror, I realized the X's matched the locations of every ranger station in the park. Suddenly, my radio crackled to life. Kevin's voice came through, but it didn't sound like him anymore. "They say thank you, Rob," the voice growled. "Thank you for finding their holy place. Now they don't have to hunt you. You came right to them." My flashlight beam caught movement in the darkness. 2 eyes reflected back at me, then 4, then 8. They were high up, at least 7 feet off the ground. A deep growl filled the cave, and I saw it. The silver one. It was bigger than the others, its fur gleaming like metal in my light. And it was standing on 2 legs like a man. But worse than how it looked was its face, because I recognized it. Underneath the wolf features, twisted and changed, was the face of Mike Chen. The silver one opened its mouth, showing rows of sharp teeth, and spoke in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. Welcome to our den, fire-scarred one. We've been waiting for you. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life. Behind me, I could hear them coming, their claws scratching on the rock. But they weren't trying their hardest to catch me. They were playing with me, hurting me. I burst out of the cave into the red moonlight, and I realized my mistake. They hadn't chased me to catch me. They'd chased me right into the middle of their entire pack. They let me escape that night. I know that now. They could have torn me apart right there, but instead they just watched with their glowing eyes as I scrambled into my truck and drove away. The silver one, the thing that used to be Mike Chen, actually waved at me as I left. When I got back to Kevin's cabin, he was gone. The ropes were chewed through, and on the wall he'd scratched a message. Join us or watch them all die. I tried calling every ranger station in the park. No one answered, just static. And sometimes in the background of that static, I could hear howling. The sun was coming up when my radio finally crackled to life. It was Sarah from the South Station. Rob? Her voice was shaking. Something's wrong. There's scratching at my door and I can hear Kevin's voice outside, but it doesn't sound right. Sarah, listen to me carefully, I said, already running to my truck. Lock every door and window. Don't look outside no matter what you... Here, I'm coming. They're saying my name, Rob. They're saying they know me. They're saying... Her voice cut off in a scream. I broke every speed limit getting to her station. But I was too late. The door was torn off its hinges and inside I found Sarah's ranger badge in a pool of frozen blood. On her desk was a phone showing a half-written text message. They're not killing us, they're choosing us. That's when I finally understood. They weren't just hunting us, they were recruiting. Over the next 2 days, it happened again and again. I'd get a desperate call from another ranger station, but I'd always arrive too late. Each time I'd find the same scene, signs of struggle, frozen blood, and messages left for me. They were playing with me, making me watch as they took everyone. I knew. By the 3rd day, I was the only ranger left. Well, the only human ranger. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of the others through my binoculars, running on all fours through the trees, their uniforms torn, their bodies twisted into something between human and wolf. I saw Kevin leading them more than once. I hadn't slept. In days. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear them in my head, calling to me, showing me visions of running with the pack. The red moon was getting bigger each night. Then my radio came to life one last time. It was Kevin's voice, but mixed, with that deep growl. Time to end this, Rob. The blood moon rises tomorrow night. Come to the fire tower. Come see what we're becoming. What you'll become. Why me, Kevin? Why are you doing this? The voice that answered wasn't Kevin anymore. It was the silver one. Mike. Because you understand transformation, fire-scarred one. Your flesh has already been remade by flame. Now let it be remade by fang and claw. Join us willingly, or watch as we take every human in these mountains, one by one. I looked at my reflection in the window, at the burn scars that covered half my face. Scars from the day I ran into a burning forest to save a family, the day that cost me my marriage and my old life. I touched them, remembering the pain of transformation. Fire tower, midnight tomorrow, just you and me, Mike. The radio crackled with laughter that sounded like breaking bones. Oh no, fire-scarred one. Not just you and me, all of us. Your pack is waiting. And if you don't come, well, there's a school bus that drives through the forest every morning. Such young, fresh minds, so ready to join our pack. The radio went dead. I looked at my rifle, knowing the bullets would be useless against them. But I had to try. Had to end this somehow. As the sun set, I made my way to my truck. The red moon was rising early, painting everything in blood light. And in that light, standing at the edge of the trees, was Kevin. His face was half changed, fur sprouting from his skin, his eyes glowing yellow. But for just a moment I saw tears running down his cheeks. "Save us, Rob," he whispered in his old voice. Then he threw back his head and howled. the sound changing from human to monster halfway through. The final hunt was about to begin. The fire tower stood like a skeleton against the blood-red moon. As I parked my truck, I could see shapes moving in the darkness. Dozens of eyes reflecting the moonlight, all watching me. The pack had grown bigger, much bigger. I grabbed my rifle, knowing it probably wouldn't help, and started climbing the tower steps. Each metal step clanged under my boots, echoing in the strange silence. No nightbirds, no insects, just the sound of breathing from the shadows below. Halfway up, I heard Kevin's voice floating down from above. "You came." He sounded almost normal. "I wasn't sure you would." "Had to," I said, still climbing. "You're my friend, Kevin. Whatever's happened to you, whatever you've become, that hasn't changed." A laugh that wasn't quite human. "Friend? Soon we'll be more than friends. We'll be pack." I reached the top platform of the tower. Kevin stood. There, his transformation almost complete now. Fur covered most of his body. His fingers ended in claws, but his eyes were still his own. Behind him stood the silver one, Mike, massive and terrifying in the red moonlight. The other transformed rangers moved around the tower's base, making circles, waiting. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Mike's voice rumbled. "The blood moon makes the change possible. Lets us remake others in our image. And you, fire-scarred one, will be our finest creation." "Why?" I asked, buying time as I looked around for anything I could use as a weapon. "Why are you doing this?" "Because humans are weak," Mike roared. "We were weak, but now we are becoming something greater. Each human we change makes us stronger, adds their memories, their knowledge to our pack mind. And the ritual sites, the bone circles? Ancient magic," Kevin said, moving closer to me. "The first wolfmen left us the knowledge. Written in stone and bone. But it only works under the blood moon. That's why we needed to practice, to learn how humans are put together. So we could take them apart and rebuild them. Better." I noticed something then. The tower platform was covered in those same strange symbols I'd seen in the cave. They'd turned the whole tower into one giant ritual site. "Enough talk," Mike growled. "Hold him." Kevin moved faster than I could react, grabbing my arms. His grip was like iron, and I could feel claws pressing into my skin. "I'm sorry, Rob," he whispered in my ear. "But once it happens, you'll understand. You'll be free." Mike stepped forward, his massive form blocking out the moon. "When you change, your knowledge of the forest will make us complete. We will rule. These mountains." That's when I felt it. Kevin's grip was shaking, fighting himself, and I remembered what he'd said in the cave. "Stop them." "Kevin," I said quietly. "Remember when we first became rangers? What we promised to protect?" His claws loosened slightly. "The forest," he whispered, "the people. Fight it, Kevin, fight them." With a roar that was half human, half wolf, Kevin shoved me aside and launched himself at Mike. They crashed together like thunder, rolling across the platform. "Run!" Kevin screamed in his human voice. But I didn't run. Instead, I pulled out my lighter, the one I'd carried since my firefighting days. The tower was old, made of dried wood and metal, and all around the platform were the circles of ritual symbols. Drawn in some kind of oil, Mike threw Kevin off him, sending him crashing into the railing. The silver wolf man turned to me, teeth bared. "Fool, you can't stop the change." "Watch me," I said, and dropped the lighter. The oil circles caught instantly. Fire raced around the platform, following the symbols, creating a burning cage. Mike howled in rage and fear. Seems these wolfmen weren't too fond of fire. Kevin pulled himself up, bloody but still fighting. "The symbols," he shouted. "Burn them all, it'll break their power." I kicked over the emergency gas can kept in the tower for the generator. Fuel poured across the symbols, the flames following. Mike lunged at me but jerked back from the fire. Below, the pack was howling in panic. "If we can't have you," Mike snarled, "then burn." He smashed through the burning railing, taking Kevin with him. I heard them crash through branches on the way down. The fire was spreading fast now, eating through the old wood. I had seconds to decide. Try to climb down through the flames or I jumped, aimed for the lake I knew was below and to the left of the tower. The same lake I'd seen every day for months from my cabin window. The impact drove the air from my lungs, the cold water a shock after the intense heat. When I surfaced, the tower was an inferno against the red moon. The pack's howls had changed to yelps of pain and fear. Dark shapes ran into the forest, but they weren't wolf-shaped anymore. They were human. I dragged myself to shore and found Kevin lying there, human again, badly hurt, but alive. The fur was gone. The claws had disappeared. He opened his eyes. Normal human eyes. "Did it work?" he whispered. A final howl split the night. Mike's voice, but fading, growing weaker. The blood moon above began to fade back to normal. "Yeah," I said, helping Kevin sit up. "I think it worked." We watched the tower burn, sending sparks up to rival the stars. The forest was quiet again, but normal quiet this time. I could hear frogs croaking, crickets chirping. "Rob," Kevin said after a while, "next time I suggest taking a job in the most isolated part of the forest." "Yeah? Talk me out of it." 3 years later, the newspaper article called it the Great Forest Fire of '76. They said faulty wiring in the old fire tower caused the blaze. The missing rangers, all found wandering in the forest over the next few days, confused and with no memory of what happened. The dead livestock and strange tracks, blamed on a pack of regular wolves that must have moved on. People believe what they want to believe. Kevin and I still work as rangers, but in different forests now. He's up in Montana, and I'm in Colorado. We talk every week, checking in on each other. Neither of us likes full moons much anymore. Most days I can almost convince myself it was all just a bad dream. Almost. But sometimes when the moon is full and red, I hear things, whispers in my head, like faraway howls. I see flashes of running through trees on 4 legs, of hunting with a pack. Kevin says he gets them too. Last week I got a letter from Danny Thompson, that kid we found in the storm drain. He's 15 now, studying wolves for a school project. He wrote that he's been having strange dreams lately. Dreams about a huge wolf with silver fur walking like a man. And he asked me a question that made my blood run cold. "Do you think they're still out there somewhere, Mr. Martinez? Just waiting for the next blood moon?" I didn't write back, but I did call Kevin. "You think we really got them all?" I asked him. There was a long silence before he answered. "Rob," he said finally, "check your calendar. Blood moon's coming again next month." I looked at my scarred hands, remembering the feel of fire and transformation. "I'll be ready," I said. "We'll both be ready," Kevin replied. I hung up and walked to my cabin window. The sun was setting, and for just a second, I thought I saw something at the tree line. A flash of silver fur, a pair of eyes watching me. But when I looked again, it was gone. Probably just my imagination. Probably. But I still keep my old lighter close, just in case. Because out here in the deep forest, where the shadows are darkest and the moon glows red, sometimes the line between man and monster gets awful thin. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind sounds almost like words, I wonder if maybe, just maybe, a part of me misses running with the pack. I should have known something was wrong when the birds stopped singing. In my 23 years as a park ranger at Allegheny National Forest, I'd never heard such silence. Even during the coldest winter nights, you could always catch the soft hooting of an owl or the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. But that morning there was nothing, just the whisper of wind through ancient pine needles and a sticky feeling in the air that reminded me of the day I lost my son. My name is Marcus Winters, and I've spent most of my life in these woods. After what happened in the caves years ago, the collapse that nearly killed me and made me give up spelunking forever, I thought I'd seen the worst that nature could throw at me, but I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I remember sitting in my ranger station that morning, staring at the old photo of Tommy on my desk. He would have turned 17 last week. The official report said he got lost on a hiking trail and fell into a ravine, but they never found his body, just his backpack. caught on a branch near the edge. Sometimes I dream that he's still out, there, wandering among the towering pines that have stood here for over 400 years. The radio crackled to life, startling me from my thoughts. "Marcus, you there? We've got another one." It was Dave, my partner. His voice had that edge to it, the same one I'd heard 3 times in the past month when climbers went missing. "Where?" I asked, already reaching for my gear. "Section F7, near the old grove." "But Marcus, this one's different. They found him in the tree. Somehow he's... Just get here." As I drove my Ranger truck down the winding forest road, my grandmother's words echoed in my head. She used to tell me stories when I was little, passed down from her Native American ancestors, about the tree walkers, creatures that lived in the forest canopy and stole people who wandered too deep into their territory. Back then I thought they were just stories meant to keep me from straying too far into the woods. The first drops of rain hit my windshield as I parked near the old grove. Dave was waiting for me, his usually ruddy face pale and drawn. Behind him, a small crowd of rescue workers huddled around the base of a massive pine tree, all looking up. "I've never seen anything like it, Marcus," Dave whispered as I approached. "He's alive, but you need to see for yourself." I followed his gaze up the trunk and my blood turned to ice. About 60 feet up, half embedded in the bark like a fly in amber, was a man. His eyes were wide open, moving frantically, and his mouth was working like he was trying to scream. But the worst part was the sap, thick golden drops that seemed to crawl up his skin instead of down. That's when I noticed it. The silence. Not a single bird in sight. And somewhere, deep in the back of my mind, a terrible thought began to form. What if my grandmother's stories weren't just stories? What if Tommy hadn't fallen after all? The rain was getting heavier now, and as I watched, a drop of that strange, amber sap fell upward, defying gravity, reaching for the branches above like a living thing. And in that moment, I realized this was just the beginning of a nightmare that had been waiting in these woods for centuries. I couldn't sleep that night. How could I after what we'd seen? The rescue team had tried everything to get that poor climber down, but the bark had grown around him like he was being swallowed by the tree. When we finally managed to cut him free, he couldn't speak, just made these awful choking sounds as more of that amber sap leaked from his mouth. The hospital called at midnight. The climber was dead. The doctors said his insides had turned to something like wood, hard and filled with rings like a tree trunk. I sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee that had gone cold, and started digging through the missing persons reports from the past year. There were more than I'd realized. Way more. Most folks thought the missing people had just gotten lost. It happens in big forests like ours. But as I spread the reports across my table, I noticed something strange. Every single person had disappeared near the old grove, that part of the forest where the trees were older than our country itself. Pulled out my map and started marking the spots with red pins. When I was done, they formed a circle around the oldest part of the forest, like something was working its way outward. The next morning, I went back to the tree where we'd found the climber. The rain had stopped, but the air felt thick and sticky. I brought my camera to document everything, trying to be scientific about it, like this was just another day at work. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. That's when I saw the first footprint. It was huge, about twice the size of my boot, and looked almost human, except the toes were long and twisted like roots. The print was pressed deep into the mud, but instead of leading away from the tree, it led straight into it, like whatever made it had walked right through the trunk. I took pictures and measurements, knowing Dave would never believe me without proof. As I worked, sap began dripping from the branches above. I watched in horror as a drop landed on a dead leaf, and the leaf just dissolved, leaving behind something that looked like brown tree bark. My radio crackled, making me jump. "Marcus." It was Dave. His voice sounded wrong, scared. "You need to get to the fire tower, now." The old fire tower stood 100 feet tall, giving us the best view of the forest. Dave was already up top when I arrived, looking through the tower's binoculars. "Tell me I'm crazy," he said, handing them to me with shaking hands. "Tell me those aren't people up there." I raised the binoculars and scanned the forest canopy. At first, I saw nothing but the endless sea of pine needles. Then something moved. High up in the branches, way higher than any climber would go, dark shapes were shifting between the trees. They looked human-sized but wrong. Too tall, too thin, with arms that bent in extra places. "We need to call this in," Dave said. "Get some kind of expert out here." I lowered the binoculars, my mouth dry. "No one's going to believe us. Then we'll make them believe us. Because I'll tell you something else." Dave's voice dropped to a whisper. "I saw one of them last night, outside my bedroom window. It was standing there looking in. Its skin looked like bark, and I swear it knew I was watching it." A twig snapped in the woods below us. We both turned to look. There, at the base of the tower, was a trail of that strange amber sap. It was moving up the metal supports against gravity, reaching for us like hungry fingers. And somewhere in the forest, a sound started. Not birdsong, not wind. It was like the creaking of branches. But it had a pattern to it, like words, like something in the trees was trying to speak. Dave and I ran down the fire tower steps so fast I thought we'd fall. The sap was following us, spreading across the metal rails like living honey. We jumped the last few steps and sprinted to my truck. As I turned the key, Dave let out a strange cough. A drop of amber sap was sliding down his neck. Must have fallen on him while we were running. "Get it off!" he yelled, clawing at his skin. I grabbed my water bottle and poured it over the spot, but the sap didn't wash away. Instead, it seemed to sink into his skin like water into dry soil. "Hospital," I said, stepping on the gas. "Now," but Dave grabbed my arm. "No time, look." I followed his shaking finger to the trees along the road. Dark shapes were moving through them, not walking but gliding, like they were part of the trees themselves, 9 feet tall at least. Their bodies looked like they were made of rough bark, with long arms that stretched out like branches. One of them turned its head toward us. Where eyes should have been, there were just deep holes filled with that glowing amber sap. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor. "Marcus," Dave's voice had changed, becoming raspy like dry leaves. "It burns inside." The nearest hospital was 40 minutes away. We made it halfway before Dave started screaming. His skin was turning gray and rough, like tree bark spreading across his face. I watched in horror as his fingers began to twist and stretch like young branches reaching for the sun. "Kill me," he whispered. "Please, before I become one of them." But I couldn't. Dave had been my friend for 15 years. We'd gone fishing together, shared meals at each other's houses, watched each other's kids grow up. Kids. Oh God, Tommy. A memory hit me so hard I almost drove off the road. The day before Tommy disappeared, he'd come home with sticky hands. I'd thought it was just pine sap and told him to wash up. But now, Dave made a sound that wasn't human anymore. His body was twisting, growing. The truck's roof began to bend. Word as he got bigger and bigger. I did the only thing I could think of. I drove straight into the nearest tree. The crash threw me against the steering wheel. Everything went black for a second. When I opened my eyes, the passenger door was torn open and Dave was gone. A trail of broken branches led back into the forest. My radio crackled. "Ranger Winters, we've got a search party formed up. 4 missing hikers near the old grove. Can you assist?" I looked at the radio for a long time. I should tell them to stay away, to close the forest, to burn it all down. Instead, I said, "On my way," because I knew something now. Those things in the trees, they weren't just taking people, they were changing them. And maybe, just maybe, that meant Tommy was still alive somewhere in those woods. When I reached the old grove, the search party was already there. 6 people with bright orange vests and flashlights. The sun was setting, painting the trees in blood-red light. "We split up to cover more ground," the team leader said. "Standard search pattern." "No," I said it too loudly, making them jump. "We stay together, no matter what." That's when we heard it. A sound like 100 trees groaning all at once. The noise seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "What was that?" someone asked. I looked. Up at the darkening sky, at the branches swaying without any wind. That, I said, was them talking to each other. A scream cut through the air, high and terrified. It came from deeper in the woods, where the trees were oldest, where Tommy had disappeared. The search party looked at me, waiting for orders. They didn't know what was out there. They didn't know that we were the ones being hunted, but I knew where we had to go. Because that scream, it had sounded young, like a teenager, like my son. "Follow me," I said, checking my flashlight, and whatever happens, don't touch the sap. As we walked into the darkening forest, I could feel them watching us from above. The tree walkers, the ones my grandmother had warned me about. And somewhere ahead, in the deepening shadows, answers waited. About Tommy, about Dave, about what these things wanted. I just prayed we'd live long enough to find them. The deeper we went into the forest, the darker it got. Our flashlight beams seemed to get swallowed up by the shadows. The trees here were different. Their trunks were twisted together like braided rope, forming walls and archways that shouldn't exist in nature. "Look," whispered Sarah, one of the search team members. She pointed her light at the ground. More of those root-like footprints, but this time they were everywhere, crossing over each other like a dance floor after a party. Then we saw the first body, or what was left of it. It was high up in the branches, maybe 40 feet above us. Nay. First it looked like a weird-shaped nest, but when I aimed my flashlight at it, I saw clothes mixed in with the bark and branches. A red hiking jacket, torn blue jeans, boots. The tree had grown through and around the person, turning them into something else, and it wasn't just one. As we looked up, our lights revealed more nests scattered through the branches. Dozens of them. Those are all people? Mike, the team leader, could barely get the words out. Before I could answer, a wet splashing sound came from behind us. We spun around to find Sarah on her knees, amber sap pouring from her mouth. It was like someone had turned on a tap inside her. "Run!" I yelled, but it was too late. The branches above us came alive. They shot down like striking snakes, wrapping around the search team members. I watched in horror as Mike was lifted off. His feet, his screams cut off as sap poured down his throat. I ran. God help me, I ran. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of breaking bones and tearing clothes as the trees pulled my team up into the darkness. Something caught my foot, and I fell hard, my flashlight spinning away into the underbrush. As I scrambled to get up, I heard a voice I thought I'd never hear again. "Dad?" I froze. There, in the dim light filtering through the trees, stood Tommy, my son. He looked exactly the same as the day he disappeared, down to the blue backpack and red sneakers. "Tommy," my voice broke. "Is it really you?" He smiled, but something was wrong with his smile. It was too wide, and his teeth looked like small, sharp branches. "We've been waiting for you, Dad," he said. His voice echoed strangely, like multiple people talking at once. "The trees told us you'd come." "What happened to you?" I whispered, backing away slowly. They showed me the truth. Tommy's skin was beginning to crack like old bark. About what the forest really is, what it wants. "We're going to make everyone part of it, Dad. No more cutting down trees, no more destroying nature. Everyone will become part of the forest." As he talked, his body began to change. He grew taller, his arms stretching into branches, his fingers extending into twisting twigs. The thing that used to be my son took a step toward me. "Join us, Dad. It doesn't hurt. Not anymore." That's when I heard it, the sound of more branches moving behind me. I turned to see the rest of the search team. They were changed now, their bodies twisted and bark-covered, amber sap dripping from their empty eye sockets. They had me surrounded. My flashlight was gone. The forest floor beneath my feet began to move as roots burst up through the soil, trying to grab my legs. I looked at the thing that wore my son's face, feeling my heart break all over again. "Tommy," I whispered, "I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner." The creatures moved closer, their branch arms reaching for me. Above us, more shapes were moving through the trees, drawn by the commotion. The whole forest was waking up. And then I remembered something. Something from the day of the cave collapse that had ended my spelunking career. Something about what saves you when you're trapped in the dark. I reached into my pocket, praying it was still there. My fingers closed around the small metal cylinder. Emergency flare. The thing that used to be Tommy must have sensed what I was about to do. It lunged forward, branch fingers grasping. But I was already pulling the flare out, my thumb on the striker. "I'm sorry, son," I said, "but sometimes the only way out is through fire." The flare burst to life with a hiss, painting everything in harsh red light. The creatures, including the thing that was once my son, jerked back, shielding their sap-filled eyes. I didn't waste a second. I threw the flare at the nearest tree trunk where amber sap had been oozing upward. The sap caught fire instantly, blue flames racing up the bark like lightning. The forest screamed. It wasn't just one scream, but hundreds all mixed together. Human voices and creaking wood and something else. Something ancient and angry. The sound made my teeth hurt and my bones shake. I ran. Behind me, the fire was spreading, jumping from tree to tree through trails of sap. The transformed search team members were climbing back into the branches, trying to escape the flames. I caught one last glimpse of Tommy, his bark-covered face twisted in pain, before the smoke swallowed him up. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Because in that moment of firelight, I'd seen something else. A massive hollow tree, bigger than all the others. And through its gaps, I'd spotted movement. Human movement. People who hadn't been fully changed yet. I pulled my shirt over my nose and ran toward it, ducking under burning branches. The smoke was getting thicker, making my eyes water. Every breath felt like swallowing hot sand. The hollow tree was like something from a fairy tale, wide enough that 3 people could stand inside it with a twisted opening like a doorway. As I got closer, I could hear voices calling for help from inside. "Hello?" I shouted, reaching the entrance. "Anyone alive in there? Help us!" Multiple voices answered. In the dim light, I could make out at least 5 people pressed against the inner walls of the tree. Their hands and feet were buried in the wood, like they were slowly being absorbed into it. Amber sap dripped down their faces, but they weren't fully transformed yet. "Hold on!" I started pulling at the wood around their limbs, trying to break them free. My hands were getting covered in splinters, but I couldn't stop. That's when I heard it, a new sound cutting through the roar of the fire. A weird clicking noise, like someone tapping on wood. It was coming from above. I looked up through the hollow tree's opening. Dozens of the tree walkers were gathering in the branches overhead. But they weren't running from the fire anymore. They were coming down. The clicking got louder as they moved, and suddenly I understood. They were talking to each other, planning. The fire had made them desperate, and now they were going to take everyone they could, transform as many people as possible before their forest burned. "They're coming," one of the trapped people screamed. I looked around frantically for anything I could use as a weapon. My eyes landed on my backup radio, still clipped to my belt. It wasn't much, but its plastic case was covered in warning labels about the lithium battery inside. An idea hit me. A crazy, terrible idea. I grabbed the radio and smashed it against the tree wall until the case cracked open. Pulling out the battery, I used my pocket knife to puncture it deep enough to start a chemical reaction. Smoke began pouring from the battery. "Everyone," I shouted to the trapped people. "Take the deepest breath you can and hold it." I threw the smoking battery onto a patch of dry leaves and dead wood near the base of the hollow tree. The chemical smoke from the battery was toxic. That's what the warning labels had said. And if these things could be hurt by regular smoke, the effect was instant. As the chemical smoke rose through the hollow tree, the bark holding the people began to loosen and crack. Above us, the tree walkers started making horrible shrieking sounds, their bodies twisting as they tried to escape the fumes. "Now," I yelled, "push as hard as you can." One by one, the trapped people began breaking free. I helped pull them out, their skin scratched and bleeding but alive. Human. "Run for the road." I pointed them toward where I thought my truck was parked. "Don't stop for anything." But I couldn't follow them, not yet, because I'd heard something else in the chaos, a young voice crying out in pain, Tommy's voice. Not the monster version from before, but my real son's voice, scared and alone. The fire was spreading faster now, and the chemical smoke was making my head spin. I had maybe minutes before the whole forest would be an inferno. I looked up into the burning branches where the cry had come from. If there was even a chance that my real son was still in there somewhere, still alive, I had to try one last time to save him, even if it meant climbing into hell itself. The heat was unbearable as I climbed the burning tree. Every branch I grabbed might be my last. They were breaking and cracking in the fire, raining burning pieces down around me. The smoke made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. "Tommy!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. "Tommy, where are you?" "Dad." His voice came from somewhere above me, not the creepy multiple voice version from before. Just my scared kid. I pulled myself up higher, ignoring the burns on my hands. The chemical smoke from the battery was still rising, making the tree walkers screech and retreat. But it wouldn't last long. The fire would burn it away soon. Finally, I reached a split in the trunk where several branches came together. There, curled up in what looked like a nest of twisted branches, was Tommy. My real Tommy, not the monster from before. He looked exactly like he had the day he disappeared. But his skin was partly covered in bark, spreading like a rash across his arms and neck. Amber sap leaked from the corners of his eyes like tears. "Dad," he whispered, reaching for me. "It hurts." I started pulling at the branches holding him, not caring that they were cutting my hands. "I'm getting you out of here, buddy. Just hold." "No, you can't," another voice spoke. The monster version of Tommy stepped out from behind the trunk. It was bigger now, its bark skin cracking and peeling in the heat. "He's part of us now, part of the forest." "No." I kept pulling at the branches. "He's my son." The creature laughed, a sound like breaking wood. "We are all its children now. The old forest has slept too long. Humans cut down trees, build their cities, kill the ancient woods. Now the forest takes back, makes them understand, makes them part of it." More tree walkers were appearing through the smoke, surrounding us. Their bodies were burning, but they didn't seem to care. The real Tommy whimpered in pain as the bark spread further across his face. I looked at my son, then at the monsters around us, then at the burning forest below. And suddenly I understood what I had to do. "You're right," I said to the creature. "The forest is powerful, ancient." I reached into my pocket, where I had one last thing, the emergency matches from my ranger kit. "But you forgot something." The creature tilted its head. "What?" "Nature isn't just about growing." I struck all the matches at once. "It's also about burning, about starting over." I threw the matches into the nest of dry branches around Tommy. They caught instantly. The creature screamed, not in pain, but in rage. It lunged at me with its branch arms extended. I grabbed Tommy and jumped. We fell through burning branches, through thick smoke, through reaching arms made of wood and bark. I held Tommy tight against my chest, trying to shield him from the worst of it. We hit the ground hard, pain shot through my leg, something was broken. But I could hear sirens in the distance. The fire department was coming. "Tommy," I looked at my son. The bark on his skin was cracking and falling off, turning to ash. His eyes were clearing, the amber sap burning away. "Stay with me, buddy." "Dad." His voice was weak but normal, human. "I remember. They found me when I was hiking. The sap. It got in my mouth, made me see things, made me want to join them, but I was so scared." "It's okay now," I said, holding him close. "You're safe." Around us, the forest was burning. The tree walkers were retreating deeper into the woods, their bodies blazing like torches. Some of them were crumbling, turning to ash and normal wood. The ancient trees groaned and cracked in the heat. Through the smoke, I saw other shapes, people stumbling out of the burning woods, the ones we'd freed from the hollow tree, the ones who hadn't fully changed. They were helping each other, supporting those who could barely walk. Tommy's grip on my shirt suddenly weakened. "Dad, I don't feel good." I looked down. The bark was almost gone from his skin now, but he was pale. Too pale. No. I checked his pulse. It was there, but weak. Stay with me, Tommy, please. The fire trucks were getting closer. I could see their lights through the trees. Someone, I screamed. Help! We need help here. The last thing. I remember before passing out was the sound of firefighters' boots running toward us, and Tommy's hand squeezing mine. A human hand, warm and alive, holding on tight. The forest could burn. The monsters could die. All that mattered was that my son was still breathing, still human, still here. 3 months have passed since the fire. They called it the worst forest fire in Allegheny's history. Over 2,000 acres burned before. They got it under control. The newspapers blamed it on the dry summer, on lightning strikes, on careless campers. Nobody believed my report about what really happened. Almost nobody. Tommy spent 6 weeks in the hospital. The doctors couldn't explain the bark-like substance they had to remove from his skin, or why his blood looked strange under their microscopes. But day by day, he got better. His memories of the past year are fuzzy, like a bad dream he can't quite shake. Of the search party, we found 3 survivors. Like Tommy, they're recovering, though sometimes they wake up screaming about trees that walk and sap that moves wrong. Dave's body was never found. I'm back at work now, but in a different part of the forest. The old grove is off limits. They say it's because of fire damage, but I know better. I've seen the warning signs. New saplings growing impossibly fast. The burned areas, their leaves a shade of green that hurts your eyes to look at. Yesterday, I visited Tommy in his room. He's almost back to normal, playing video games and complaining about homework like any teenager. But sometimes I catch him staring out his window at the trees in our backyard, his hand rubbing the spots on his arms where the bark used to be. Dad, he said as I was leaving, do you think they're really gone? I wanted to lie, to tell him everything was fine. But I remembered my grandmother's stories about how the tree walkers were as old as the forest itself, about how they could sleep for hundreds of years waiting. I don't know, buddy, I said honestly. But if they're not, we know how to fight them now. I keep a flare gun in my truck these days, and matches in every pocket. The other rangers think I'm crazy, jumping at shadows and checking every tree for signs of amber sap. Maybe I am, but last week I found something that keeps me up at night. In the far corner of the forest, where the fire didn't reach, there's a young pine tree growing, by itself in a clearing. Its trunk is twisted in a way that normal trees don't grow, and its branches seem to reach for you as you walk past. At its base, half hidden in the dirt, I found Dave's ranger badge, covered in a thin film of sap. And sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind is still, I swear I can hear the trees whispering to each other, planning, waiting. Because that's the thing about forests. They're patient. They have all the time in the world to grow back, to remember, to change. Tommy's birthday is next week. He asked for a treehouse like he's always wanted. I told him maybe next year. For now, I keep the matches close, and I watch the trees. Always. Watching. Because deep down, I know the truth. You can burn a forest, but you can't kill it. Not really. The roots go too deep, spread too far. And somewhere out there, in the darkest part of what's left of the old grove, amber sap is still moving against gravity, climbing up young trees like hungry fingers reaching for the sky. Waiting for the day when the forest decides to wake up again. End. I never thought I'd be afraid of grass. Funny how life changes. One minute you're a normal park ranger studying plants. The next you're watching a cow turn inside out while it's still breathing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Elizabeth Morgan, and until 6 months ago, my biggest worry was keeping tourists from picking the protected wildflowers at Tallgrass Prairie Preserve. At 44, I thought I had seen everything. These Kansas plains could throw at me. 20 years studying plants in a lab and another 5 as a ranger here. I was wrong. So very wrong. It started with the grass. Now, most people think grass is boring, just endless green waves moving in the wind. But I knew better. Each blade tells a story. Each pattern means something. That's why I noticed when things started getting weird. The grass started moving, in ways it shouldn't. You'd see circles and spirals appear overnight, but not like those crop circles you see in cornfields. These were different. The grass wasn't bent or broken, it was growing that way. Growing faster than anything I'd ever seen in my years as a botanical researcher. I remember the first morning I knew something was really wrong. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I was doing my usual morning patrol in my beat-up Ranger truck, coffee thermos in hand when I saw it. A perfect spiral of grass, maybe 50 feet across, where every blade stood straight up despite the morning breeze. The rest of the prairie was swaying like normal, but not this patch. It was like someone had frozen time in just that one spot. I got out to take a closer look, my boots crunching on the dry ground. The air felt different there, heavier, like right before a storm. But the sky was clear. As I reached out to touch one of the upright blades of grass, a cold shiver ran down my spine. I'd gotten that feeling before, usually when a mountain lion was nearby. That feeling of being watched. But out here in the open prairie, I could see for miles. There was nothing. That's when I heard about the cattle. Randy Matthews, one of the local ranchers, called the station in a panic. Said one of his cows was wrong. I didn't understand what he meant until I got there. The cow was alive, that was the horrible part. It was breathing and moving, but I don't know how to explain this without sounding crazy. It was like someone had turned it inside out, but it was still walking around. Its organs were on the outside, pulsing in the morning sun, but it didn't seem to be in pain. It just stood there, grazing like nothing was wrong. I called every vet in 3 counties. None of them had seen anything like it. They all said the same thing, it should be dead, but it wasn't. And deep down I knew this was just the beginning. The local Kaw people had warned us. I wish I'd listened sooner. Their elders came to my office a week before the first incident, talking about windwalkers and how the spirits were restless. I did what any modern, scientifically minded person would do. I politely nodded and filed their warning away as interesting local folklore. Now I can't sleep without seeing those moving lights in the grass, hearing the whispers in the wind, and wondering what ancient truth those elders were trying to tell us. But back then, I still thought I could solve this with science. I still believed in a world where grass was just grass, wind was just wind, and things that were inside were supposed to stay that way. I was about to learn how wrong I was about everything. The thing about fear is that it sneaks up on you. It doesn't just jump out and yell boo. No, real fear grows slowly, like a shadow getting longer as the sun sets. After finding Randy's inside-out cow, more reports started coming in. 3 more cows in the next week, then a horse, all alive but turned wrong side out. The weird part was how calm they all were, just eating grass like it was any other day. Local news started showing up, and soon my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I started staying late at the preserve, watching the prairie as the sun went down. That's when I first saw the lights. They weren't like car headlights or flashlights, more like little balls of glow that moved through the grass. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. You know how when you stare at something too long you start seeing things that aren't there? But then one night changed everything. Was sitting in my truck parked on one of the higher hills. The moon was full, making the grass look silver. I had my notebook open, marking down where I'd seen the lights appear. That's when the wind picked up. Now I've lived in Kansas my whole life. I know what normal wind feels like. This wasn't normal. It moved in circles, making the grass dance in perfect spirals. And in those spirals I saw something. Like when you see heat waves rising from hot pavement. But these waves had shape. They were tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet, and they moved with purpose. My hand shook as I grabbed my flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, and for just a second, I wish I hadn't seen it. Where the light hit one of those wavery shapes, something flickered, like looking through clear water, but the water was standing up and had a face, not a human face. Not an animal face either, just holes where features should be. I dropped my flashlight. When I picked it up again, the shape was gone. But the grass where it had been was growing right before my eyes, shooting up inches in minutes. The next morning, I went to talk to Joseph Running Bear, one of the Kaw elders who had warned me. He lived in a small house just outside the preserve. When I told him what I'd seen, he didn't look surprised at all. "The Windwalkers," he said, pouring me some coffee with hands that looked strong despite his age. "They've always been here, Ms. Morgan. Long before your preserve, before the settlers. They walk between worlds, using the grass as their doorway. But why are they hurting the animals?" I asked. He shook his head. "They're not hurting them. They're studying them, learning how we're put together, like children taking apart a toy to see how it works." A chill ran down my spine. "Why now? Why are they showing themselves now?" "Because," he said, looking out his window at the prairie, "they're getting ready for something bigger. The cattle are just practice." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that there had to be a scientific explanation. But I remembered those empty faces in the grass, and deep down, I knew he was right. The Windwalkers were real, and they were getting bolder. That night, I set up cameras around the preserve. Big mistake. When I checked them the next morning, every single one had captured the same thing. Those lights, moving closer and closer, to the lens. And in the last frame of each camera, just before they stopped working, you could see them. Faces without faces, bodies made of air, reaching out with hands that weren't quite there. The preserve started feeling different after that. During the day, tourists would still come to see the tall grass prairie, not knowing what was hiding in plain sight. But at night, the whole place came alive with movement. The grass would ripple in ways that had nothing to do with wind, and sometimes, if you listened carefully, you could hear something that sounded almost like whispering. I started carrying a voice recorder with me. Not that it did much good. Every time I thought I'd caught one of those whispers, the recording would just have static. But between the static, sometimes you could hear something else. Something that sounded like words, but not in any language I'd ever heard. The other rangers started noticing too. Dave, my assistant ranger, quit after he saw one of the Windwalkers up close. Said it reached right through his chest, like it was curious about what was inside. He didn't get turned inside out like the cattle, but he hasn't been the same since. I knew I should have quit too. Any sane person would have, but I couldn't. Something about these creatures fascinated me almost as much as they terrified me. I had to know more. I had to understand what they wanted. Looking back now, I wish I'd listened to that little voice telling me to run, because understanding was exactly what they wanted, and they were about to show me things I could never unsee. The first human victim was a jogger, Sarah Chen, 26 years old, who liked to run the prairie trails early in the morning. We found her sitting calmly on a bench near the visitor center, breathing normally, but wrong. Just like the cattle. She was alive and talking, but everything that should have been inside was outside. The weird thing was, she didn't seem to notice anything was wrong. "Beautiful morning for a run," she said to me, her heart visibly beating in the open air. I threw up in the bushes. The doctors couldn't explain it. They kept her in the hospital running tests, but nothing made sense. Her organs worked perfectly. They were just on the outside. She stayed that way for 3 days before everything suddenly snapped back to normal. She couldn't remember anything about what had happened. I knew I needed help. Real help. Not just the local police who kept writing unexplained incident in their reports. I called Dr. Mike Thompson, my old professor from college, and Dr. Linda Rodriguez, who studied strange weather patterns. They arrived within days. "This is impossible," Linda said, looking at my weather charts. The preserve had been having mini tornadoes, dust devils we call them, but they weren't acting right. They'd appear on completely calm days, move in perfect straight lines, and disappear all at once. We set up a research station in my office. Maps covered the walls, showing where each incident happened. Red pins for animal cases, blue for Sarah Chen, yellow for the weird grass patterns. Looking at it all together, my stomach dropped. The pins made a spiral, getting closer and closer, to the center of the preserve. Mike brought all kinds of fancy equipment. Infrared cameras, motion sensors, air quality monitors. Whatever these things are, he said, they have to leave some kind of trace. But the windwalkers were smart. Every time we thought we had proof, something would go wrong. Cameras would break. Sensors would give impossible readings. One morning, we found all our equipment turned inside out but still working. Then came the night everything changed. We were all staying late watching the monitors when every sensor went crazy at once. The air got heavy, like before a storm. Through the window, we could see dozens of lights dancing in the grass. "We should go out there," Mike said, grabbing his camera. "That's a terrible idea," Linda replied, but we went anyway. Sometimes curiosity is stronger than fear. The grass was moving like waves in the ocean, but there wasn't any wind. As we walked, I felt something I'd never felt before, like the air itself was watching us. Linda's weather equipment was going nuts, spinning in circles. Mike was filming everything when he suddenly stopped walking. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I heard it, like whispers, but not in any language I knew. They seemed to come from everywhere, and nowhere at once. Then Mike's camera picked something up. On the small screen we could see them clearly for the first time. Tall, shifting shapes that looked like they were made of clear glass or water, moving through the grass. They had long, flowing limbs and those horrible, empty faces. "This is amazing," Mike said, stepping closer to one. "Mike, don't," I started to say, but it was too late. The windwalker reached out, its hand passing right through Mike's chest. He didn't scream. He just stood there, a look of wonder on his face as his body started to change. It wasn't violent or bloody. It was gentle, almost beautiful in a horrible way, like watching a flower bloom in fast motion. Within seconds, he was like Sarah Chen had been. Linda screamed and ran. I couldn't. Because as I watched, I realized something terrible. The windwalkers weren't just studying us. They were learning, getting better at what they did. Mike's transformation was perfect. Every organ arranged exactly as it should be, just on the outside. When it was done, Mike looked at me with calm eyes. "Elizabeth," he said in a voice that wasn't quite his, "they want to show us something." That's when I saw it. In the center of the spiral of grass, a perfect circle was forming. The grass there was growing and dying and growing again, faster and faster. In the middle of that circle, the air itself seemed to tear open, showing something else. Another world, maybe. Or another dimension. A place where the laws of nature worked differently. Mike walked toward it, his inside-out body moving. Normally, "Come see," he said. I ran. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life back to my office and locked the door. Through my window, I could see more lights appearing in the grass, more windwalkers emerging. They were getting ready for something bigger, much bigger, and I was the only person left who knew what was really happening, the only one who was still normal. But as I sat there, watching the lights multiply across the prairie, I realized something that made my blood run cold. They had let me stay normal on purpose. They wanted someone to watch, someone to understand, someone to witness what was coming next. I spent that whole night in my office, watching Mike stand at the edge of that strange circle in the grass. He didn't move, didn't seem to need food or water, just stood there, his inside-out body glowing slightly in the moonlight. Linda was still missing. I kept calling her cell phone, but all I got was static and those weird whispers. By morning, I knew I had to do something. I called Joseph Running Bear again. "They've opened a door," he said when I described the circle. "A door between their world and ours. You need to close it, Elizabeth, before it's too late." "How?" I asked. "First, you need to understand what they want." I didn't have to wait long to find out. Around noon, 3 dust devils appeared out of nowhere, spinning across the prairie in straight lines. They surrounded my office, and inside each one, I could see the watery shapes of windwalkers. The air crackled like before a lightning storm. That's when my radio crackled to life. Linda's voice came through, but wrong, like she was talking underwater. "Elizabeth, you need to see this. Come to the old barn, please." I knew it was probably a trap, but Linda was my friend. I had to try. The walk to the old barn was the longest 10 minutes of my life. The grass moved away from my feet as I walked, like it was afraid to touch me. When I got to the barn, I found Linda standing in the doorway. She looked normal, but her shadow was wrong. It moved even when she didn't. "They showed me everything," she said, her voice still sounding underwater. "Come see." Inside the barn, the air was thick and heavy. And there, hanging in rows like clothes on a line, were parts. Human organs, all perfectly preserved, gently swaying in a wind that wasn't there. Some I recognized from anatomy books, hearts, lungs, livers. Others looked human but wrong, like they'd been changed somehow. "They're learning," Linda said. But now I could hear other voices under hers, whispering, in that strange language, learning how to make us better, how to improve us. "Where did these come from?" I asked, even though I was afraid I knew the answer. "The ones they turned inside out," she said. "They make copies, perfect copies. The originals go back inside. But we keep the copies for study. She'd said we. I backed away slowly. Linda, or whatever was wearing Linda's shape, smiled. Her teeth looked like they were made of glass. "Don't you want to help us learn, Elizabeth?" I ran. Again. But this time the windwalkers were ready. Dust devils sprang up everywhere, trying to herd me toward that circle in the center of the prairie. Inside each twister, I could see their faces, their empty eyes watching me. I nearly ran straight into Mike. He was still standing where I'd left him, but now his organs were slowly shifting, changing shape, becoming something else. Something not human. "The door is almost ready," he said in that same underwater voice. "Soon more will come through. So many more." That's when I saw it, the huge pattern taking shape across the whole prairie. All those smaller circles and spirals had been practice, preparation. Now the grass was moving everywhere, growing and dying in waves, forming an enormous pattern. From the ground, it just looked like chaos. But I knew if I could see it from above, it would be a perfect spiral, with that first circle at its center. A spiral big enough to cover the whole preserve. The wind picked up, and with it came more whispers. But this time, I could understand some of the words. They were counting down. I ran back to my office and locked myself in, but I knew it wouldn't help. Through my window, I could see more windwalkers appearing every minute. The air itself seemed to be turning to glass, warping everything I saw. And in the distance, dark clouds were gathering, spinning into a shape I knew too well from growing up in Kansas. A tornado was forming. But this wasn't any normal tornado. This was something they were making, something they were going to use. My phone rang. It was Joseph Running Bear. "The door's almost open," I said before he could speak. "I know," he said. "Can you see the pattern?" "Yes." "Then you know what they're making. A door big enough for all of them to come through at once. Big enough to change everything." I watched as the tornado grew larger, its funnel cloud glowing with the same strange light as the windwalkers. "How do I stop them?" I whispered. "You already know," he said. "You've seen what they are, what they're made of, and I had. They were like air made solid, like living wind, which meant they're gas," I said slowly. "Like air, like wind." "Yes," Joseph said. "And what happens to air when it gets hot enough?" I looked at the emergency fire equipment in my office. The flare gun, the matches. "It rises," I said. "It burns." The tornado was getting closer. Through my window, I could see Mike and Linda and others I didn't recognize walking toward it, their inside-out bodies glowing brighter and brighter. I knew what I had to do, but the price would be huge. "I'll lose my job," I said. "Maybe go to jail." "If you don't do it," Joseph said, "there won't be any jobs, or jails, or humans left to fill them." I grabbed the flare gun and all the matches I could find. Outside, the windwalkers were gathering. The tornado was almost ready. It was time to fight back, even if it meant burning everything I'd spent my life protecting. I'd like to say I had a clever plan, but sometimes the only plan is the crazy one that might get you killed. The tornado was growing bigger by the minute, its funnel glowing with that strange light. Windwalkers were streaming toward it from all directions. their clear bodies catching the light like twisted glass. The grass across the entire preserve was moving in that terrible spiral pattern, and in the middle of it all was that first circle, the doorway they'd made. I had my ranger truck, a flare gun, and 2 boxes of matches. Not much to fight an army of wind spirits with, but it would have to do. First, I needed to get to the maintenance shed where we kept the emergency equipment. The problem was, about 20 windwalkers stood between me and it. I could see them clearly now. No need to hide anymore, I guess. They looked like people made of moving air, with those horrible empty faces and long, flowing limbs that never quite stayed the same shape. I grabbed my radio and switched it to the emergency channel. "This is Ranger Morgan. We have a Class A fire emergency at the preserve. I repeat, Class A fire emergency. This is not a drill." Then I turned the volume all the way up and threw it as far as I could in the opposite direction. The windwalkers turned toward the sound. They're not quite there. Heads tilting like curious birds. I ran for it. Inside the maintenance shed, I found what I needed. Gasoline cans for the mowers. 5 of them, each holding 5 gallons. I loaded them into the truck bed with shaking hands. That's when I heard Linda's voice behind me. "Oh, Elizabeth, that won't help." She stood in the doorway, her inside-out body glowing brighter than before. Behind her, I could see more figures approaching. Mike, Sarah Chen, and others I didn't recognize. All changed, all wrong. "The door is almost ready," Linda said in that underwater voice. "Why fight it? Let us show you how much better you could be." "Better?" I said, buying time as I reached slowly for the flare gun. "You're turning people inside out." "We're helping them see the truth," she said. "Everything hidden, brought to light. No more secrets, no more lies, just pure truth inside and out." The windwalker inside her made her smile with glass teeth. "Don't you want to be part of something bigger?" I pulled out the flare gun and pointed it at the gas cans in my truck. "Back off, Linda, or whatever you are." She actually laughed. "You wouldn't. This preserve is your life." "Not anymore," I said. "Now it's just grass," I fired. The first gas can exploded, sending burning fuel everywhere. The windwalkers screamed, not in pain, but in surprise. They'd never seen fire before. I jumped in the truck and hit the gas, driving straight through them. Their bodies scattered like smoke in the wind. Behind me, the fire was spreading fast, eating up the dry grass. But I wasn't done. I had a plan. Now, a terrible plan, but the only one that made sense. The preserve had fire breaks, wide strips of dirt that helped stop wildfires from spreading. They divided the land into sections. If I could set fires in the right places, using the fire breaks to control them, I drove to the first spot, right at the edge of the giant spiral pattern. Through my windshield, I could see the tornado getting closer, its funnel now full of swirling shapes. The windwalkers were gathering inside it, thousands of them, getting ready for something big. I threw another gas can out and shot it with my last flare. The fire roared to life. The windwalkers noticed this time. The tornado changed direction, heading straight for me. Inside it, those thousands of faces all turned to look at me at once. I drove to the next spot, using matches now to light the gas. Each new fire made the windwalkers scream louder, their voices like wind through broken glass. But it was working. The fires were spreading in a pattern. My pattern. A circle of flames to fight their circle of grass. As the fires grew, the wind walkers started to drift upward, pulled apart by the heat like morning fog in sunshine. The changed people, Linda, Mike, all the others, they were changing back. The fire seemed to break whatever spell the windwalkers had put on them. Their organs were shifting back inside, everything returning to where it should be. But the tornado was still coming, and inside it was the biggest windwalker I'd seen. Yet, it had to be at least 30 feet tall, its body made of swirling storms and lightning. I had 1 gas can left. The tornado was 100 feet away. 50. 20. I reached for the matches. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the prairie I'd loved for so long. Then I lit the last fire. The explosion knocked me off my feet. The last thing I saw was the giant windwalker reaching for me with hands made of lightning as fire roared up all around us. Everything went white. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. The nurse told me I kept mumbling about wind and glass while I was unconscious. The first thing I noticed was that something felt wrong inside me. Not painful, just different. Like everything had been taken out and put back, but not quite in the same way. The doctors couldn't explain it. All my organs worked fine, they said, but some of them were reversed, like looking at a reflection in a mirror. They called it situs inversus. I called it a reminder. Through my hospital window, I could see the news helicopters flying toward what was left of the preserve. The fire had burned almost 1,000 acres before they got it under control. The official story was that it was started by a lightning strike from a freak tornado. In a way, I guess that was true. Linda and Mike came to visit. They looked normal. Now, everything back where it should be. They didn't remember much, just bits and pieces. Dreams of wind and whispers, they said. Sometimes they'd catch themselves looking for patterns in grass, but that was all. Did we imagine it? Linda asked, sitting by my bed. Sometimes it feels like a weird dream. I showed her my latest X-ray, with my backward heart and reversed organs. Not a dream, I said. But maybe that's better than remembering everything. The preserve was closed for investigation. They found strange patterns burned into the ground. Circles inside circles inside circles. The grass that grew back came in wrong at first, spinning in spirals, growing in impossible directions. But after a few weeks, even that went back to normal. Joseph Running Bear visited me the day I got out of the hospital. He brought me tea in a thermos, and we sat in the hospital garden. They'll be back, he said quietly. Maybe not here. Maybe not soon. But they'll try again. How do you know? He pointed to the sky. Watch the weather reports. Strange storms, unusual wind patterns, grass growing in circles. They're already looking for another door. I thought about my reversed organs, a permanent reminder of how close I'd come to being changed completely. Next time we'll be ready, I said. He nodded. Next time we'll know what to look for. I lost my job at the preserve, of course. Can't keep a ranger who sets fire to 1,000 acres of protected land, even if it was to save the world. But I found a new job, tracking weather patterns for the National Weather Service, looking for signs, unusual storms, weird winds, places where the grass moves when it shouldn't. Sometimes, on windy nights, I think I hear whispers in the air. And sometimes, when I look out at fields or prairies, I catch glimpses of something clear and tall moving through the grass. But they're just glimpses now. The windwalkers learn to fear fire, and that keeps them cautious, hidden, but they're still out there, still watching, still learning. Last week I got a call from a ranger in North Dakota. She said they're finding strange circles in the grasslands there, perfect spirals of grass growing overnight, and cattle acting weird. I packed my car that same day. In the trunk, gasoline cans, flares, and matches. Lots of matches. The windwalkers want to change our world, but I've changed too. They left part of themselves inside me. My reversed organs are proof of that. But they also taught me something important. Everything has a weakness. Even creatures made of wind and air, and impossible things can burn. As I drive north watching the prairie grass wave beside the highway, I keep an eye on the weather. There's a storm brewing in the Dakotas. The wind is picking up, and somewhere in that wind I know they're waiting. But this time, I'm ready. The end news clipping from the Wichita Eagle. Dated 1 week later. Mysterious grass patterns appear nationwide, Weather Service reports. Unusual storm activities in multiple states. Scientists are baffled by the sudden appearance of unexplained circular patterns in grasslands across the American Midwest. Meanwhile, the National Weather Service has reported an unprecedented increase in localized tornado activity, often occurring on otherwise calm days. The article continues on page A7.